Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Mind Unfiltered. I'm your host, Ira, and I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Ms. Andes, a licensed therapist with the Mental Health Association of Central Florida. In today's episode, we talk about teen mental health and what therapy is really like. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you, so let's get right into it. So, to start us off, could you tell me a little bit about yourself and the work you do at the Mental Health Association of Central Florida?
Sure. Well, I'm a duly licensed clinician in the state of Florida. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor, as well as I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I have the designation of qualified supervisor for both of those licenses. I'm also a nationally certified counselor, and I'm certified in a technique called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR. And the work that I do with the Mental Health Association of Central Florida is I'm the director of youth and family services for their Outlook Clinic. And the Outlook Clinic is located in downtown Orlando, and we provide free services from anyone ages 6 to, 206 who might not have insurance or if they're underinsured. So, what that might mean is maybe you have a health care plan and it doesn't cover mental health benefits. Maybe your health care plan does cover mental health benefits, but you can't afford the copay. So, we would be there to provide the services and say that you do have insurance and you want services. We can help you find a provider that takes your insurance and meets the specifications that you're looking for. For instance, some individuals seek a provider of a certain gender in a certain location. Um, Maybe they have transportation issues, so they would like a provider telehealth or within 5 miles of their residence, things like that. So we help them get services no matter what. We try to remove those barriers.
So, what inspired you to work in youth mental health and what keeps you passionate about this field?
Well, I was inspired to work with the youth because really early on, even when I was a teenager, I really wanted to work with youth, and have also worked with adults in the field as well, and I enjoy that as well. I found out I do enjoy all ages, but even when working with adults, I see that a lot of the things that happen in their childhood impacts um, how they are in their adulthood. So I really like working with youth, helping them, you know, hopefully prevent some things that might happen. I can't prevent certain events, but prevent things, meaning help them work on communication skills to maybe stick up for themselves if they're facing a bullying situation, or work with them and their family so that they can have a more amicable family unit. There's less fighting at home, things like that. Um, and then if they have already experienced something that's unpleasant, like a traumatic event, then I can help them process that. So again, helping them work on things in their youth so that they can, they don't have to take that with them into adulthood. Now, I'm not saying I help them forget things, but I just help them better navigate situations and help them process things.
In your experience, what are the most common mental health challenges that specifically like teenagers are facing today?
With teenagers, I see a lot of depression and anxiety, and that has a lot to do with bullying, not feeling like they fit in, not feeling like they're heard. And the reason I say depression and anxiety is because like they're very closely linked. Um, that's why a lot of times when you're prescribed an antidepressant, if you struggle with anxiety disorder, you're also prescribed an antidepressant because it works the same way. They're very closely linked. A lot of times, if we have depression, we have anxiety, and vice versa. So I say depression is worrying a lot about the past and things that happen. And then, whereas a simple way to look at anxiety is like focusing too much on the future. So the goal is to have a balance. And again, not having anyone forget about what happened or not think about the past at all or not think about the future at all, but having a balance where you're not obsessing over it and you're not like stuck in the past or you're obsessing over the what ifs of the future.
Like a lot of teens deal with stress, but it can be hard to tell when it's something more serious. So, how can someone know if what they're feeling might be a sign of a deeper mental health issue?
So a lot of times we might not notice the sign, but maybe others that are around us that we trust might notice the signs. Um, a lot of times it's going to be that something that is affecting you and like you're behaving in a way that's out of your ordinary. This can include sleep. Maybe you're sleeping more than usual, or you're more restless at night and can't get to sleep, keep waking up. Also, we might see it affect your eating habits. So maybe a sudden loss of appetite, or maybe you're eating more. You find yourself more hungry, or you can't get full because like you just feel a certain way. Feelings are overwhelming and you just want to eat. Um, Also, a loss of interest in things that we used to enjoy. So maybe you're a youth that really likes soccer, and all of a sudden, like for some reason, like you just don't like it anymore. And I'm not talking about, just changing your mind on what you like as a sport. That's different, which is why it's kind of hard to pinpoint like when something's a warning sign. But I mean, say you eat, breathe, sleep, soccer, or whatever your passion is, and then like you just slowly like lose interest in it. Not because you're developing an interest in another sport or another activity, but like you just kind of feel like blah, I don't feel like doing anything. I want to just stay in my room all day. Another warning sign is maybe if you have friends, you start isolating from them, not talking to your family as much or whoever your support system is. So again, like major changes in like your routine or your habits, which
Yeah.
can be hard again to see, especially if it's happening to you. That's why it's good to have somebody or multiple people that you trust that, you encourage them to let them know, like, hey, if you see something, just be honest with me. And then any changes, like major changes in sleep or eating habits. And again, we also need to rule out medical stuff because you might experience a change in eating or sleeping or loss of interest. Maybe there's a medical issue. So I always encourage people and young people as well, like to also talk to their primary care provider, their doctor, because some stuff might seem physical, but it also affects us with our mental health. So
Right.
it's important that you get medically cleared, but then also, if things are bothering you, to find a mental health provider to talk to.
So, a lot of teens are also nervous about going to therapy in general when they need it. So, what do you wish more young people understood about what therapy is really like?
So going to therapy doesn't mean you're crazy. You're not going to get locked up in a hospital. Therapy is simply adding somebody else to your support network. If you don't have one, like, the therapist can be your first person in your support network. Because I know some youth, like, they don't feel heard by their caregivers, or maybe they don't have any friends. So it's somebody to have in your corner. We're not going to tell you what to do, but we listen without judgment. We're not going to be like, you're a bad person, you shouldn't have done that. We might say like, well, how did that work out for you? You know, do you, if they're showing remorse about the way they handled a certain situation, I might say, well, what are some options? Like, how do you wish you would have handled it? And then we can brainstorm different things. Or maybe somebody comes to see a therapist and they don't know how to cope with intense emotions. Um, then I'm not telling them what to do, but I'll educate them on healthy coping skills. Um, but yeah, therapy isn't advice giving. Therapy, we're not here to shame you. Um, Everything is confidential, but if you are, a danger to yourself or others, and we'd have to let somebody know, including your caregiver. But most of the time, I'm not going to tell your caregiver the nitty gritty of what we're talking about, because then that can damage the therapeutic relationship. But again, if I'm concerned, I usually will ask the adolescent or the child, like, hey, I'm kind of worried. Like, do you mind if we bring in, mom or dad or aunt, uncle, whoever their caregiver is, and like we discuss this together. If they say no, and again they're at risk, like their life is in danger, then I'll be honest with them and I'll say like, hey, I'm gonna have to let somebody else know, but it's to keep you safe. But other than that, I really like to keep things between me and the client. Now, it's going to be normal for caregivers or parents, guardians, whoever, to want to know what's going on. So again, I like to include the youth and say like, well, hey, are you okay if I give your caregiver like a brief update? And brief might be like, hey, we had a good session today, or we kind of covered some tough stuff, so they might need extra support. Or I gave them a homework assignment in therapy today, and their homework assignment might be like, list 10 things that you like about themselves. So like maybe you can help them if they're stuck. But I never want to do anything behind the client's back, because then like you lose that trust. But again, sometimes I might have to tell somebody again if their life is in danger.
You also mentioned that you're EMDR certified, which is a type
Yes.
of therapy that I feel like most people don't really know that much about. Can you explain what EMDR is and how it could potentially help teens who've experienced trauma or anxiety?
Sure. So EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, it's a mouthful. It was originally designed to help with trauma. And since then, it's been proven to help with a lot of different things: mood disorders, eating disorders, substance use, anything where you have a negative belief, either about the world, yourself. So with the eye movement, it first started not really with eye movements, but Francine Shapiro, who was the creator of EMDR, she noticed that she took a walk because she just had something, mildly disturbing happen to her. And she was thinking about this mildly disturbing thing when she was taking a walk. And she realized that after the walk, she felt better. So she came back and she was talking to her colleagues. And I can't remember if she was in school at the time or she was already a practicing clinician, but she, came back and was talking to her colleagues, and they started doing trials in regards to like bilateral stimulation. So bilateral means basically like both sides, two sides. Bi means two, lateral is side. And so because she was thinking like the movement, right, left side movement was what really helped her feel better about that incident. So, in sessions, there's not a lot of room to go walking. So she was kind of thinking like, how can we emulate that? So they started having clients follow, maybe your fingers moving from side to side. Since then, it's developed. There's buzzies you can have in your hand. There's ear pods where there's alternating sounds. You can follow a light bar. For kids, maybe it's like, depending how young they are, maybe if they're little kids, like maybe like there's a puppet going from side to side, or a cartoon animal on the screen. And basically the bilateral movement, it bypasses the part in our brain that's the fight, flight, or freeze, the part that where if something traumatic happens, we're kind of stuck and we feel like it's happening again. So doing those eye movements or the bilateral stimulation, it doesn't have to be eye movements, kind of bypasses that part so that we're able to process it better. Because a lot of times we're kind of just stuck. And, our brain kind of thinks like we need to live in that fight, or freeze moment. So a good analogy is, say you're on a boat and you're wearing your life vest, and all of a sudden it starts to sink. And, thank goodness you have your life vest on and that saved you. So you're not going to take it off. So, you're driving home, you still want to keep it on because like that saved you. So you're putting on your seatbelt. It's kind of uncomfortable, but you're still going to keep that life jacket on. Okay. You're going throughout your day. It's kind of hard to change your clothes with the life jacket on, but you want to keep it on. It's hard to shower and things like that. So the point is, even though the life jacket saved you in that moment, it's hindering you from like really moving forward and living your life fully. So a lot of times with trauma, maybe we got chased by a bear. So running in that movement saved us. And, having that rapid heartbeat and like, being alert and at our surroundings, that saved us in that moment. But if we're in class listening to a lecture and we hear rustling that kind of reminds us about the bear that was in the woods, our brain takes us back to that moment, and like our body is going to want to run, and we're going to want to be hyper vigilant and looking around. But we don't need that anymore because we're not in the woods being chased by a bear. We're in 6th period math class. So again, EMDR helps our brain, that part of the brain, kind of relax a little bit so we can process more about like what happened. And again, you're not forgetting what happened. You're just able to process it better. You're able to navigate it better. It's not wiping away the memory, but it's just helping you deal with it better, digest what happened better, As with any work with trauma, the foundation is coping skills. So I'm not going to dive in with trauma, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's different kind of therapy. I'm not going to dive in unless I know you have like a good foundation of coping skills. Okay. So that's the first step of any kind of trauma work. So maybe it's really hard for a client to practice coping skills, or maybe they get triggered just practicing coping skills because they know it's going to lead to eventually talking about the trauma. And again, we never force anybody to delve into that if they're not ready to, because that can actually be more traumatizing. So it's only like when the person's ready. But the first foundation is coping skills. And EMDR, we call that resourcing. But, some people, maybe it takes a couple weeks. Some people, maybe it's, again, really hard for them to remember the coping skills or to practice it. Maybe it's a couple months. So everybody's different. So there is no set, like, okay, it's going to just be like 2 sessions or 6 sessions or, 12 sessions. And then also, we don't just, with the standard way of EMDR, we don't just automatically dive into like this, the worst thing that's happened to you. We work up to it. So we start with maybe like smaller things so that your brain and your body kind of get used to it. And the reason why I say your body as well, because our body holds on to a lot of trauma. And so sometimes we might not really fully remember what happened, but I might just say like, well, when you're talking about that, what are you feeling in your body? So, a lot of times people might feel it in their head or their stomach, nauseous, or like, I feel like there's a ball in my stomach. So, you're able to work on distressing events, even if you can't remember exactly what happened, because like you can even just work on body sensations or your feelings too. So if you're going to therapy and, something happened and you want to work on it, it's okay if you don't remember every single thing that happened. Like, I would still encourage you to go to therapy.
What do you think are like the biggest misconceptions people have about anxiety and depression?
That you can snap out of it. So I hear a lot of clients saying like, my mom just doesn't understand why I can't just get out of bed. I told her like, I can't do it. Or, my caregiver says like, snap out of it. Everybody gets anxious if they're in a room full of people, just snap out of it. And, sometimes they'll be like, my parent just said like, well, I did it. And it's not that easy. And I think there's that big misconception that we can just get over it, because a lot of times mental health issues, they're not physical. So if I broke an arm, like you're going to see my arm in a cast. Or if I hit my head, I'll probably have like a bruise or like a gash. But I think it's hard for people to conceptualize that something might be wrong or not how we like it, because like you might not see the physical symptoms. And also a lot of times you can be depressed. And if I'm going to school, like maybe I don't want to act depressed. So like, maybe I'm going to act like the class clown, or I'm going to act like everything's fine. And so a lot of people can't tell like something's wrong.
Yeah.
So that's the thing about anxiety and depression as well, because I think a lot of times we learn to mask, because our automatic response when somebody asks like, oh, how are you? Our automatic response is like, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Okay. A lot of us aren't like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Now, some people are, and I think that's getting more accepted. Yeah. But I think a lot of people think like I have to pretend like everything's fine.
So what role do you think like family environment plays in shaping mental health?
It plays a huge role. And one of my licenses, like I said, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And in that way, the family therapy model is like, you think of things in systems. So if somebody's coming to you for depression, a lot of times we're going to want to meet with the family to see like how we can all help the family as a unit. Because a lot of times it isn't just like, oh, that kid over there is depressed, but it's usually like, okay, maybe there's issues between like the parents that are leading to stress, and then maybe one child is depressed, maybe the other one struggles with anxiety, maybe there's some attention issues. So coming together as a family to help the whole family navigate the potential problem. Because again, like maybe I'm the sibling of somebody that has depression, like maybe that's really hard on me. So maybe as we have family therapy, like I'm going to learn how to cope with that, while my sibling that has depression is going to learn how to cope with, you know, dealing with sad feelings, maybe learning things and doing activities that they might not want to at first, but like things that'll like help boost their mood. Because a lot of times if we're depressed, like we don't feel like doing anything.
Yeah.
It's hard to get out of bed. It's hard to even bathe. And I know some people are like, oh, that sounds gross, but like it's true. Like if you are in such deep depression or sometimes like anxiety or any kind of overwhelming emotion, you're not going to feel like doing the basic things. And so it's not gross, it's reality that sometimes it's going to be hard to get out of bed and shower or even like eat.
Yeah.
But definitely the home environment, the family environment plays a big role. And that's why I say sometimes if you don't feel supported by your family, then maybe looking outside to make sure that you have other supportive people in that network. That could be teachers, friends, mentors, coaches from, maybe a sports team.
So say a teenager, for example, had built up resentment towards their parents, and how would you approach that in therapy?
Well, first, working with that client to explore what's going on, but I would encourage them to also allow their parents to come into the session, maybe not right away, but I would encourage them to include them at least for some session or maybe even just one session so that they can talk about what's going on. Because maybe the youth says like, oh, well, I can't talk about it at home because like maybe they're always on their phone or they're too busy for me, or maybe mom works too much, dad works too much, whatever. That's not going to happen at home. So then at least maybe in the session. And the good thing about the electronic age is like maybe a parent is away on business or doesn't, maybe one parent doesn't live close by. So maybe we can include them on a Zoom call or something like that. But definitely if they have resentment towards their parents and their parents are willing, I would encourage them to come in for a session if everyone is on board. And if not, because some parents, are like, oh, I'm not the problem, fix my kid. And so we have to work with what we have. So then I work with that client on like processing those emotions, working on identifying things they can do, whether that's learning assertive communication on like how to advocate for themselves in the home. Again, I'm not saying that's a magic wand and it's going to fix things, because if I'm not working with the parents, then maybe the parents will still, shut that kid down or shut that teenager down. But again, in session, I would be working on coping skills and resiliency, on like how to work with also accepting how things are. Because a lot of times we wish we could change our parents or wish we could change our siblings, and we can't. So a lot of therapy is also accepting things the way they are if they really can't be changed. And then like, how do we cope with them?
Statistics have also been showing that, especially like in the youth, anxiety has risen, depression has risen, and a part of it is due to social media and the new digital age. So what do you have to say about that?
I could definitely see that. Like I would agree with the statistics. I think there's several reasons why that might be. One is that we're on our electronics more. So, we're not forced to interact with people as much as we used to, like before all these electronics. For instance, I'll drive by a mall and I'll see a bunch of teenagers. They're together, but they're all on their electronics.
Yeah.
Whereas, let's say 20 years ago, we're like talking to each other face to face. Also, another thing we're seeing in social media is people posting, like, oh, I have this perfect life and I'm so fabulous. And then so we see a lot of comparing.
Right.
And then another thing we see is the cyberbullying, which you can bully a teenager or youth from like a school, that's like in a different county with technology. Whereas again, like 20, 30 years ago, a lot of the bullying might just happen in that school. Still wasn't a pleasant experience. But I think with cyberbullying now, so many more people can get involved. And that can be very overwhelming for young people because you have people from different areas, people that they've probably never even met, picking on them, bullying them. People can alter pictures to make it look like it's something else. So like that's another form of bullying. But on the flip side with social media, I've also seen a lot of positive campaigns, positive things out there like your blog, other organizations where like they maybe have like support groups, peer support groups for youth that it's like, okay, if you've been bullied, like let's talk about it. So hopefully we start swinging to way more positive stuff with social media and electronics.
What are your thoughts about like school and mental health? Do you think schools in general should be working more on educating the youth on the dangers about mental health?
Yes, and I do see a lot of schools trying to. Um, I've been part of schools where they help educate parents and the students on like suicide, depression, anxiety, how to support your student. I know a lot of local schools, they have mental health counselors on staff. Now I wish there were more. I know a lot of the mental health counselors are spread thin because a lot of times they have to work with several schools.
Right.
So it's not like they can just be based at one school. They might have to go to like a different school every week or every weekday. So I do see improvement in that, but I think there's always room for growth.
With the Mental Health Association of Central Florida, what resources can teens find on your website or that your organization offers?
We've actually set up tables in schools to show our resources as well. So that's one. But I mean, obviously, we can't go through all of Florida or all the United States to do that. But luckily, other organizations do that as well. They'll put a table in a school during lunch hour or whatever. But on our website, you can find different resources. For instance, right now we have back to school, like how to cope with back to school stuff, bullying, the importance of getting good sleep. We have like a self-care calendar for every day this week, something that you could do to help while you're going back to school. So we just have a lot of different links on our website. Also our connections program.
Yeah.
If they call or email our connections program, that can get youth and or adults connected to different resources within the community, whether that's counseling or some youth are experiencing stress because of other components. Maybe there's food insecurity. So maybe they don't know where they're getting their next meal. Housing insecurity. Maybe their parent, guardian, caretaker, can't afford to pay the rent and they can't sleep at night because they don't know if they're going to have a roof over their head next month. So the Connections program provides resources for that kind of stuff too, like places that can do rent assistance or low income housing and things like that. But going back to like social media and the internet, if you like Google, mental health resources in whatever area you're in, luckily, a lot of times you'll find a lot of resources. There's lots of like hotlines and helplines and things like that too. Text lines, like if you don't feel like talking, there's like places you can text for support.
What is like one last piece of advice that you would give to teens who are starting their mental health journey?
I would let them know to be kind to themselves because we're our own worst critic. So to, be kind to yourself. Remind yourself of the things that you have overcome. Try to remind yourself of the strengths that you do have. If it's hard to think about that, like ask somebody you trust about some of your strengths. and know that it takes courage to ask for help. So I would really applaud them for taking that first step, whether it's, going on our website or asking their parent for help or teacher or school counselor. It takes courage. And so also giving them a pat on the back for doing that as well.
Thank you so much for your time today and your insights. I really appreciate all of the knowledge and wisdom you've shared with us today. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much.